Hi everyone, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you're here, it probably means you have some interest in my book, and for that I'm truly grateful. I'm also very thankful to Professor Martinico and Professor Fasone for inviting me to contribute to the Diritti Comparati blog. I just received 10 hard copies from the publisher, Springer Law, as part of Springer Nature, but I managed to leave them all in my office, and today I'm not there. And today is the deadline for sending in this video before the summer break. So I don't have the book with me physically, unfortunately, but you should be able to see the book cover on screen right now here, I think. This book means a great deal to me, as I imagine is the case for most authors, and not only because of the work, of the efforts that went into writing it, but especially because it really represents almost 10 years of my professional life. The journey started back in 2016 when I had the pleasure of working as an assistant to Mr. Eduardo Valencia Ospina, former member and chair of the United Nations International Law Commission and special rapporteur for the topic protection of persons in the event of disasters. He also contributed the foreword to the book, something I'm especially grateful for. This project then continued through my PhD and some years as a postdoc at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna under the supervision of Professor Emanuele Sommario, to whom I'm also very thankful. The book has a long and rather didactic title, Climate Change Adaptation, Disaster Risk Reduction, and Human Rights in International Law. I could have gone for something shorter and catchier, but at least the title tells the reader what to expect. Indeed, in the book, I examine how international law regulates two areas that are often overlooked, climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, or DRR, what I sometimes refer to as the minor siblings of climate change mitigation on the one hand, meaning greenhouse gases emissions reduction, and disaster response on the other hand, which involves humanitarian assistance after that disasters occur. While adaptation and DRR encompass the vast range of measures required to prevent and prepare for climate-related disasters and to reduce their impacts. My focus then shifts to the role of human rights law in these two specific sectors. And rather than concentrating on the well-established fact that climate change and climate-related disasters negatively affect the enjoyment of human rights, the focus of the book is instead on how and to what extent human rights law can contribute to strengthening, enriching, and enforcing the legal frameworks on adaptation and disaster risk reduction. To those who remain skeptical about the role of human rights law in these as other fields, I would argue that it is difficult to deny all the recent developments, the growing dynamism, and to some extent the impact of the human rights approach in relation to climate change and disaster law, as well as other international law areas today. In the book, I therefore trace three main avenues through which the human rights approach has developed. First, the integration of human rights into the international climate and disaster regimes, a process driven by certain non-governmental actors in particular. Second, the interpretation and development of human rights obligations and standards by United Nations and other international and regional human rights bodies in relation to climate change and disasters. And third and final, litigation, where human rights arguments are being used in a growing number of strategic and high-impact climate and disaster-related cases, a field that is driven that has been driven by a transnational network of lawyers, activists, donors, academics, and of course by some important and progressive rulings issued by domestic and international courts. So chapters 3, 4, and 5 of the book cover these three routes in some detail, while a particular focus is on litigation, which I believe is currently the most rapidly evolving and perhaps impactful dimension of this human rights approach. The book is first and foremost an academic contribution. Therefore, in the concluding chapter, I try to offer broader reflections on some of the cross-cutting issues that emerged during the research, including on the role of different actors in international lawmaking, the fragmentation of international law and practice and how to address it, and of course the role of human rights within the broader context of international law. These are reflections that I hope will be of certain interest to scholars of international law and beyond. But I also designed the book to serve as a sort of toolkit for those engaged in strategic litigation, suggesting that more attention should be given to adaptation and disaster risk reduction, areas that are still largely neglected in this context if compared to climate change mitigation or emissions reduction. Yet these areas are also characterized by huge gaps and huge needs for greater legal accountability. So thank you very much for your attention. My book is available in electronic format from Springer Law, Springer Nature, and it's part of their Sustainable Development Goals series. Of course, feel free to reach out if you have questions or comments. Many thanks. Thank you.